Hello. I've kind of been thinking about this, and I'm just kind of curious. When do children and infants or the fetus, when do they begin thinking?
Well, you sort of picked up right where we were before segment of refreshment when we were talking about vibration. Mm-hmm. And you're also picking up on the discussion we had yesterday about how vibration and thought are the same thing. So you think a thought and then the thought thinks. And so at many levels of their being, they are vibrating, so you must call them a thinking being. But we know what you're talking about. When does this being that is becoming, that is forming in the mother's womb, that will be birthed into the physical experience, at what point does its consciousness as you know it to be come forth? And we say, not easy to answer because there are variables, and not easy to answer because every part of them is already vibrating and then thinking. But usually that consciousness in the way you mean it enters upon first breath. You see, the reason that this debate over all of this is so volatile is because, and even as we've been talking in this gathering here today, you recognize that you are before you come forth into this body. And we promise you, you are thinking from that vantage point. The source within you does not need a physical vessel in order to perceive this time-space reality. So source is thinking about all of this, but does not necessarily need this particular vortex to flow through. Now let's take it a little further. When you sleep, do you have an active point of attraction going on in the way that we mean it? In other words, well, in the sense of vibrating, of course, you're always vibrating. But when you slumber, you withdraw your consciousness and you reemerge into non-physical. So there is no gap between you and you while you are sleeping. Okay. Good to know. There is no gap between you and you while you are meditating if you achieve that feeling of detachment. There is no gap between you and you when you are in an attitude of appreciation.
In the womb, let's go into the womb. The baby, or the fetus, or whatever, is receiving the vibrations from the thoughts of the people around him, the parents. Is that right?
Certainly acclimating, and can begin on a cellular level to resonate with the vibration of what's going on around. But you got to know that the source within you is the dominant vibration through all of that. That's why we say when you were born into this physical body, you were at that place of pure positive energy. That's the perspective that you hold coming in.
Let's just say I was 20 years old. Is there an advantage of having a child at that young of age where maybe I don't have an aligned vibration, or I'm not in as aligned as I would be if I were 32 or 33?
Or you could say that for most people, the longer you live, the less aligned you are.
Sure, yeah.
Young parents really make better parents because they're still selfish enough oriented that they leave their kids alone.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So what is it that we can...
Oh, we made trouble there, didn't we? Sort of like we're poking at you with a stick.
So, I mean, coming from my parents, my mom comes from a culture where she says that, and I'm the baby, and she says that the last-born child is typically the most adored and the most loved. And I've been known to be pretty sensitive, which I think is a good thing.
Well, that's a horrible thing to tell to a middle child. Right?
So... I mean, I feel like I've been maybe more connected to Source than maybe some people who maybe weren't shown a lot of love as children. And so you say, get out of the child's way and let his own guidance system take care of him or her. But is there something that we can offer these very young children, along with stepping out of their way to let their own guidance come through, such as, just pure love and appreciation to that child? Am I making sense here?
You are. The reason that people can say, and would be accurate when they say it, that a child that is born when their parents are feeling more secure, when they've settled into well-being in a stronger way, it is logical that they would provide a more feathered nest for a child coming in. Mm-hmm. And it is also logical that if you are born into an environment where people are stable and they feel good, that the influence that they provide you as you are born into that environment would feel good to you. But we are not ready to say necessarily that that's the best environment for someone to be born into, because it sort of teaches you to look for your well-being to come through other humans. And that really is looking for love in all the wrong places. We know that this seems almost exactly opposite of what people strive for. People want to be stable, they want to be secure, they work to be tuned in, they want to be good influence for their children because they want their children to have a stable basis. And we say your children have a stable basis coming in, a stable vibrational basis, and the most important thing that you could teach your child or anyone that you want to offer benefit is that you recognize that you are an extension of source. You know about the vibrational potential gap between your thoughts now and who you really are, and an example that you work every day to close that gap as best you can. In other words, we would not encourage anyone to try to create a haven so that when their children are born, they have nothing ever to push against or less contrast. Because when you think about it, contrast is what causes their expansion. And you would not want to deprive anyone of the expansion. But then we say, you don't need to worry about it because they came forth knowing who you are. Look at the children. They come forth no matter how much parents try to feather the nest. By being as stable as they can be and having their life all figured out, these new kids coming forth, no matter how good you think your life is, aren't having any of it. Because they didn't come forth to regurgitate your life. They came forth to live their life. So that's why there will always be that generation gap. There will never be a time, there will never be a child who will say, oh, I see you figured it all out already, and I will just listen to what you say, and I will try to replicate it. You've never seen a child like that, and you will never see a child like that. They're wired differently than that, you see. All of you are your individual creators, and you came forth to have your experience, not to replicate somebody else's, you see. And that's why the more people try to faction off into these groups and call themselves the right group with the right connection and the right rules, the more the next generation rebels it, and the next generation rebels it, because it defies the eternal internal nature of who all of us are. The more distracted you are from anyone, the better off they are. Unless you are someone who can get tuned in, tapped in, turned on as you hold them as your object of attention. But then they might become addicted to their connection through your vortex, which isn't good for them. Because you can't hold them as your object of attention all the time. And when you don't, they might feel like a puppet that somebody's let go of the strings. It's really better to teach everybody about their own connection. You have yours, you live your life, let them live theirs, and live happily ever after in your creative, co-creative endeavors. But don't try to be the vortex for anyone. Okay. And don't ask anyone to be the vortex for you. Okay. You've all got your own hookup.